Can other see all of our faces on the sides, or is it just showing the slideshow right
Yeah, they can, depending on what view they've picked.
now? Okay.
Yeah, and they can hear you right now.
Okay.
All 44 of them that have logged in already, 45.
Got it.
That's good.
So doctors, we are going to start here in just a few minutes. I wanted just to let Dr. Kim know that I am going to start you live on Facebook here in just a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome, everyone. Hi, everyone that's joining us. This is Valerie from the Washington AGD. Thanks so much for joining us. Dr. Kim will be getting started here in just a few minutes. It is 2:24, so you are a little bit early. Enjoy our slideshow that's presented from our CE Programs Director, Dr. Tim Hess, on some upcoming webinars. Hi, everybody. Thank you for chatting me. Good afternoon. So stand by. We're going to let everyone get up on online here. We'll be starting right at 2:30.
All right. Good afternoon, Val. Good afternoon, Dr. Hayamoto and Dr. Kim. Good to see everybody. As we're getting ready for Dr. Kim here, please and take the time to take a look at our upcoming speakers that we're going to be featuring for our WAGD Stay Home, Stay Healthy CE series. I just want to remind everybody that this CE series is free. It doesn't matter if you're an AGD member or not an AGD member, you will be receiving CE credit. Please do not send emails or texts or anything in the chat window asking when will your CE appear. You were given these instructions when you registered. A paper verification of your CDE will arrive in your email at the email account you registered with in a day or so. So make sure you print that off and save that for your records. AGD members, we will be recording your CE automatically with the Academy of General Dentistry. However, they are extremely backlogged right now. So it could take 2 to 4 weeks for your CE to show up on your transcripts. Again, please keep a paper copy for your records. As we get rolling here, I just want to thank all our sponsors that have contributed to these CE and these webinar events in various ways. For instance, sending out emails, email reminders, sending out the registration links, and providing a little bit of funding so we can pay for the Zoom account. Comet USA, the Academy of General Dentistry, Washington Academy of General Dentistry. We also would like to thank Seattle King County Dental Society, Pierce County Dental Society, Snohomish County Dental Society, the University of Washington School of Dentistry Continuing Education is one of our major partners on these events. We'd also like to thank our friends from the Great White North, the Canadian Academy of Restorative Dentists and Prosthodontics, and let's see, and Patterson Dental. So thank you everyone for helping put this webinar together. As you can see, we have a full lineup of speakers next week. Everybody from Dr. Kevin Queechin to Leanne Brady, Judy K. Mastoff, and the list goes on. Just found out a few minutes ago that Dr. John Nosty will be joining us next Friday afternoon after Dr. Alan Yassin's dental implants study group is done. Also, don't miss Dr. Ralph Schuler on Wednesday. He's going to give a lecture that he gave at the International Academy of Nathology meeting in Tucson a couple of years ago. Just an excellent, excellent presentation. Fantastic clinician. You won't want to miss that one. For those of you that are big fans of composite restorations, Dr. Jae Seon Kim will be presenting next Thursday afternoon for us as well. So we're going to come around to the front here again. Again, these are our sponsors. Thank you to all our sponsors for helping put this program on. Again, for those of you just getting on to the webinar, your CE credit will be sent to you via email in the next day or so. Want to emphasize this CE is being brought to you free as a member benefit of being a member of the Washington Academy of General Dentistry or the Academy of General Dentistry. For those of you that aren't AGD members, we encourage you to join. We'd also like to welcome our AGD members from California and Texas that are joining us today. Welcome aboard. We hope you enjoy our WAGD Stay Home, Stay Healthy CE series. Well, it's 2:30, and with that, it's time to introduce our speaker. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Jae Seon Kim. He's a board-certified prosthodontist practicing in Seattle. Prior to starting his private practice, Dr. Kim was a full-time faculty at Augusta University, Georgia, predominantly teaching in the Ronald Goldstein Center for Aesthetic and Implant Dentistry alongside Dr. Gerard Sheesh. Dr. Kim received his MSD degree and a certificate in prosthodontics from the University of Washington and is an affiliate assistant professor in restorative department at the University of Washington. There's one other thing I'd like to add. He is a heck of a gold operator, does beautiful gold inlays and onlays alongside of us in our Tucker Cast Gold Study Club. For those of you that are just joining us, we will be sending CE credit via email tomorrow at the email you registered at. Please do not type in the chat box, when do I get my CE? How do I get my CE? That's all going to come to you via email. For those of you that are AGD members, these CE credits will be reported to the AGD. And those credits will appear in the next 2 to 4 weeks. They're very backlogged, so just be patient. Today, we're not going to use the chat feature for questions. Rather, please type your questions in the Q&A section. All right, we're also not going to use the hands up feature of this webinar. We're going to let Dr. Kim proceed through his presentation, and at the end there, we'll boil down the questions that we receive and we'll moderate those for Dr. Kim. So without further ado, Dr. Kim, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and sir, could you please start sharing yours?
All righty. Thank you so much, Dr. Hess. Let's see if I can share the right one. Hold on. Let's see. There we go.
Beautiful.
Can you see that?
Yes, sir, Dr. Kim.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hess, and thank you everybody for participating in this webinar. I know this is a crazy time for everybody, and I just hope that within the next hour I can deliver something that I feel very passionate about, which is dentistry and photography, just to ease your mind for at least the next hour or so. Ms. Jae Seon Kim, and I am a dentist practicing in Seattle, Washington. I do predominantly restorative dentistry. I do lots of single restorations in the posterior, and I do use a lot of triple tray impressions, and nothing wrong with that. And this is my daily work that I do on a daily basis. And I do have a fair share of my mistakes or things that have gone wrong. I do cement restorations, and patients come back and they ask to be, to be redone the next week. And there are times that I have to learn from my mistakes. And today I would like to kind of share some of the knowledge or the tricks or tips that I've learned from my mentors over the years. So hopefully we can all benefit and apply that to your practice on a basically practically once we get back to practice. Although I do enjoy doing single tooth dentistry, I still do enjoy doing oral rehabilitation or full mouth reconstructions. And as Dr. Hess has just mentioned, I did go to University of Washington for my PROS training. And what was interesting, when I finished my PROS residency in 2011, I moved across the country because I had a great opportunity and I got a job at Augusta University. And one of the unique things about this experience was I got to spend about 60% of my time with Dr. Sheesh, who is a very, very well-renowned aesthetic prosthodontist and just a passionate educator and a true artist. And Dr. Sheesh and his residents, I was in the center with them, teaching them, but I actually consider this time to be my second PROS residency, because every day was a true learning experience from me. I was supposed to be teaching, but I was actually learning more from everyone around me, the residents, Dr. Sheesh, and my fellow faculty, Jimmy Landano. These were all fantastic people, and those are memories that I just cherish to this day. And that's why I say I am a prosthodontist, but I had 7 years of training, one in UW and one in Augusta. So why is it that, and what is the reason for today's topic, digital photography? Well, I believe that every dentist has a very unique set of skills that their patients can benefit from, and the patients need to acknowledge that talent. And one of the best ways to show what you can do for them is through digital photography. And I like to take photos just to show off, actually to communicate really well with the lab technicians that we work with, because we really can't do any of the stuff that we do with them. But ultimately, the end goal is to make the patients happy and also communicate to them what we can do for them. So today's title of this presentation is Utilizing Digital Photography to Improve Shade Communications, and we'll talk about how I do that for anterior and posterior restorations. And I'd like to kind of start off today's lecture with Catherine. So when I came back from Augusta in 2015, I started teaching at University of Washington 3 days a week, and I was working in a private practice 2 days a week. And this was my first time experiencing private practice, out of the academic world. It was quite an experience. When I first started working there, the owner that had just retired hired me as an and gave me this patient and said, this patient, I need to see this patient. I did some composite on number for the last couple of years, but they've been fracturing off. And I think it's time for you to do some crowns for her. And I said, okay, well, let's have a look and see what's going on. It was recommended to the patient from the previous doctor that the patient needs zirconia crowns on number 8 and 9. So as you can see that these teeth, you can see they had some composite restorations on. She has some severe wear, and you can see the crowding in the anterior super eruption as well. So at this point, I said, okay, well, doing 2 crowns is a good option, but let me tell you, I use a better for you. If I can take out one of your tooth, do braces for about 1.5 years, and restore 9 of your teeth, I can make your smile look pretty. And when I said that, there was a long and the patient asked me, have you done anything like this before? And obviously that was a very different moment. She wasn't expecting for me to, come up with this elaborate treatment planning, and she just had a lot of questions, and she just couldn't trust what I was telling her, that it is going to actually deliver the outcome that she had wanted. So today I'm going to talk about how I use digital photography to actually talk to Catherine and show her what could be possible and the treatment that I've actually executed for her. So in the next 30 minutes, I'd like to talk a little bit about how to set up your camera. And this is going to be applicable to any, from beginners to, even have a camera and doesn't know what to do because they're so overwhelmed by all the different sets to do. Goal is by the end, everybody should be able to use the manual mode and fully control the exposure of their cameras. And there are some people that are taking photos, but usually one setting, and they don't lend it to any of their friends because, if their friends play with their camera and the settings get messed up, they don't know how to, go back to where they used to be. So also those people, it'll be helpful so that you can actually control your settings on a daily basis. And for those who take really good photography and who know all about this, I still might have some little pearls that you might be able to implement in your photography skills. And after that, we're going to talk a little bit about the shade guide, the different types of shade guides to use, but more so how to use this accurately so you can replicate the right photos for your lab. And we'll finish off with talking about how to use a gray reference card and a polarizing filter that's going to help clarify which shade is going to be right for the patient. And all we're trying to do is we're trying to prevent this type of a rainbow of color in the patient's mouth. You'll notice that when patients come in and patients have been, to different dentists, and you'll notice that all of their restorations have different colors. And if we can somehow make it more consistent and calibrate our workflow, so every time we deliver a restoration, the ceramist knows what color they've used and they can replicate that in the next restoration. So if we can prevent this type of rainbow color in the patient, I think that's going to be very helpful for everyone. This is just a case prescription that I wrote up that I saw very commonly written in the student clinic. And this is what it says: please fabricate zirconia or PFM crown or Emax crown A2 for number 14. And you have to think, what would the technician or the ceramist think when they receive this kind of prescription, right? What is an A2 crown? Have you ever seen an A2 crown before? And that, I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of the crowns that we get back are basically, it's an imagination of what this technician or the ceramist thinks what this tooth will look like. We need to do better than that. And we have great technology that is extremely convenient and less expensive to use, which is digital photography. So in my practice, I use a DSLR. I know there's a lot of different types of camera out there, the mirrorless cameras that are on the market. And they're basically saying that DSLR is out of fashion and it's going to be, off the market pretty soon, which I think it's not a bad thing, because the DSLR cameras are actually, the prices are going down. And the type of quality of pictures that you can get from the DSLR camera is plenty sufficient for our dental photography world. So I still continue to use the DSLR. I thought about switching to the mirrorless, but perhaps the investment of upgrading to a more expensive camera that produces similar quality images may not be worth it for me. So I'd like to stick with DSLR, but the most important thing is it's not really the equipment itself, but because all these cameras take really good photos. The most important thing is to shoot the photos in RAW form. So there's the RAW form, which is basically the raw file, the original file that contains trillions of colors. And the JPEG is the compressed form for that. And if you use the compressed form, there's a lot of limitations of what you can do, especially color correcting and post-production. So you make sure you want to use the raw photo. And this is one of the reasons why I don't really recommend using like your iPhone or your point and shoot cameras, because they don't allow you to take the photos in the raw form. So the raw form can be kind of compared to the novel itself. JPEG is more of like the Cliff Note version of this. So here is my center. If you look at my camera, see that I actually take both forms, the raw photo and the basic form. And then why I do that is sometimes the raw photos, it takes a little bit of a time to load on the computer, or if you want to load your photo on the iPad, what I do is I take the photo, have one card, SD card, all the raw files go into one card, and the one on the bottom, all the JPEGs go in there. So when I photo, I pop SD card out with the JPEGs in it, put it into my iPad. So I go to my patients immediately, and I give the iPad patients so they can zoom in and out, count the photos. And actually increase the case acceptance quite a bit. So let's talk a little bit of exposure. Exposure is probably the most basic but important of using dental photography. This can be applied to, outside of dental photography as well. So there are usually three main factors that contribute to the exposure of a picture, and that is shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. So let's start with shutter speed. I have a shutter speed of something like 1/8,000th of a second. So that means the shutter opens within that short period of time, or any of numbers with 4 digits, 4,000ths, 2,000ths, and 1,000ths of a second. Those speeds, you can actually capture almost any action because it freezes the image. So this is good for sporting events. If you're trying to take pictures of your pet running around or your kids, this is a good number to use. If you go up to like the fourth, 8 seconds, the images become extremely slow. So the image that you see is going to be moving within the frame. So let's see. The once you have a shutter speed that is extremely fast, because less light comes into the camera and have a darker image, and when the shutter speed slows down, you're going to have a brighter image. So for dentistry, you want to stay somewhere in between where you don't have an image that is going to be moving like you see on the right side. You can take pictures of the constellation at night. You can have the shutters open for hours, or you can take a photo like this of a hummingbird frozen in air. And in dentistry, obviously, you want to have a shutter speed that freezes the image, the subject in the photo, because you don't see anything moving. The aperture is kind of like the iris of the eye, and it controls the amount of light that comes into the camera. And it goes by f-stops. So if the f's are low, you have a wider aperture, and then and get more light coming in, which will obviously give you a brighter image. Now the aperture is something that you can use to be really creative with the photography. So this controls the depth of field, which means it focuses on just your subject, or it can focus all the way in the background as well. For example, if you're taking a portrait photo, you really don't want anything in the background to be distracting. So you just want to focus on that person's face. So you would use an aperture or an f-stop that is relatively low, so it blows out everything in the background. So that's a shallow depth of field. And when you take photos, if you have a shallow depth of field, that means your central might be in focus, but your canines and premolar in the back are completely focused. That is actually very distracting, and you're not trying to create an artistic work in your photography because you're communicating information in your lab. So you want to use an f-stop relatively high so that you can have a deep depth of field, which you want the centrals and the premolars in the background to be in focus. Now the ISO is the sensor. It's more of a setting. It's basically like how much a sponge can soak up the water. So ISO is the sensitivity to light. ISO is relatively low. It is sensitive. When it's high, it's sensitive. So you might think, oh, we should shoot all our in high ISO. Problem is, as the ISO gets higher, you get more digital noise. So and the cameras have done a great job. Now you can go up to 16 and 3200 ISOs. You can take pretty good photos, but photography, because we take for photos, you want to lower the ISO as much as possible so that you clear image, especially when you blow up the picture. So in dental photography, we just talked 3 factors. The f-stop, want to keep it as high as possible or higher in the higher range, so you get depth of field. For the shutter speed, you want to keep it relatively fast so the image is not moving. For the ISO, you want to keep it as low as possible so you get a crisp when you blow up the image. And all this put together, if you do all of this and take a photo, you're getting a photo something. It's gonna be a very dark image because you're actually reducing all the light that is coming into the camera. Dental photography is almost like taking pictures in a cave. It's, we're taking pictures, surrounded by lips and cheeks, and it's a dark place. So you need to have a fourth component, which is the flash. And you have different types of flashes that you can use. We have the ring flash, as you can see on the left, very good to use for posterior restorations or in the posterior segment of the mouth. It gives you a really good illumination back there, so it's a very convenient form of flash system to use. I personally use the twin flash systems because it's more flexible, and it actually makes the workflow in my restorative practice a lot easier. One thing I've noticed when I got out of school and got into private practice is I started quickly realizing that patients are not as patient as they are in school. You can't take a lot of pictures on them for hours. You just have to be really in there and efficient, be in and out. So with the twin flash systems, I am able to do that. And I'm going to show you my personal setup that I use, and how it helps the photographic experience much easier. Flash, it's important to set the flash in the manual mode. So this is just the back of my camera here going into, and I don't use a commander on the top. It just makes the camera a little bit heavier. So you just go in and make sure the mode is on manual, and the compensation, that's half. You can go up to 1, kind of show you what kind of compensations I use. Don't want to use TTL because automatically compensate the amount of and you will have the inconsistent result. So you want to make sure keep consistency using the same settings with the same reference cards and shade guides, and you keep on repeating that with the ceramist that you use or you work with, because otherwise, if you don't have consistency and you keep changing the settings, your ceramist cannot learn your style, and you will always have inconsistency in your results. Focus, there are, ASC, auto, single servo, and continuous. The best probably to use the single servo, which is best for non-moving objects. And for the metering mode, I tend to use the center weight matrix is the most popular one. It's basically the camera takes, kind of makes an average of the entire area and just kind of determines where to focus on. But I like to use the center weight because most of our pictures are in the center. The color temperature, this is not too important, especially because we'll be talking about the gray card later down the road. And if you have a gray card, you don't have to set the color temperature to be exactly this. The only reason why I do set it to this is the flash. The flashes also have the color temperature, and the color temperature of the flashes that I use is the manufacturer says it's 5200K. So I just like to match that. 5200 to about 5500 is the daylight color temperature. So you can use that for shade matching. And also for the color space, if you go into your camera, you should set it to Adobe RGB. There's sRGB and Adobe RGB. Adobe RGB, again, has a lot more color spectrum. So this is the better color space to use. Now, basically, we've kind of talked about how to set up your camera, and this is where the rubber meets the road. And so how do I set up my camera? Because there are so many different brackets and systems that you can use, and flash systems, ring flashes, twin flashes. And this is basically what I use in my daily practice. This is what I carry into the operatories all the time. So if you look at the camera, my camera is actually a very old camera. It's a D600. It's a full frame digital camera, DSLR. It came out in 2012. And it actually, when it first came out, there was a lot of problem with this camera, and there was a huge recall on this camera because every time the shutter opened and closed, it splashed some oil on the sensors. So a lot of people were seeing spots on their pictures. So Nikon did a huge recall and took back all their cameras and basically released a new one, which is a D610, almost the next year. So this is not a very good camera, but I didn't have any problems, and I've been using it for almost 10 years. So the type of camera is not really that important. It's actually the lens and, and how you set up your flashes are more important. I like to use the 105 Nikkor micro lens. And a lot of people, should I use an 85 millimeter lens or 105? You can use an 85 millimeter lens on a sensor camera, and it'll probably be the same length as using a 105 on an FX camera. But I more in the forums that using this type of 105 camera on a full camera does give you a sharper image and you have superior quality. So I like to use this lens, and I have 4 twin flashes that I've configured just like this. So the holder you see here in the middle is comes with the system in the R1C1 system. And also this diffuser that you put in, it actually guides the light to about 45-degree angle. And I take the same here and I put these little films on it, and I'll show you what that is later. So these are the two systems that I use. And if you see here on the screen, on my camera, there is U1 and U2. So U1 is a user setting. You can have presets where you can put all your, f-stops and shutter speed and ISO and all the color space in there and save it to this. So when I walk in, I always take the photos with this polarizing filter first, which is under U1. And then I take this off and I put this on, and then I put it under U2 and take pictures, which makes it a lot more efficient. And I don't have to play around with, putting on the filter and, adjusting my angle and whatnot. You just take it off. It takes 1 second, and then you just put it on, turn the dial, and then you're good to go. So what is my setup? What is my f-stop? What is my shutter speed? What is my ISO? And what is my flash intensity? That's all you need to know for my setup. And this is what I use. I put my camera in the manual mode. I put it in f22. You can go a little bit higher if you want to. ISO 100 and the shutter speed 1/60th of a second. And you could go up to 200 or 2/50th of a second. The only reason I put it on 1/60th is I think it's fast enough. And I also have a studio that I take portrait photos of. And when I put my shutter speed up above like 200th or 2/50th of a second, I see bars in the pictures because the shutter moves too fast. So I just kind of set it on 1/60th of a second. So when I bounce back between the APERTURE and I go back to take portrait photos, I don't have to fuss around with this too much. And the flash intensity with this setup, I reduce it to about half because otherwise you get too harsh light when you take pictures. So an example of a photo with this, taken with this setting, is like this here. So you get good illumination, you got a good depth of field, and it's pretty evenly lit, okay? The next setup, so that's actually U2, and this is U1. I always do this first, and there's a reason for that, and I'll talk about that later. This is the setup for my polarizing filter. It's almost the same, f-stop 22 and shutter speed 1/60th. ISO I have to increase, and the flash intensity I have to increase because the polarizing filter cuts out a lot of light. If you use the same setting and take a picture with this filters on, your picture will be completely black. So you have to increase the intensity and the ISO. If you take a photo like this, and this is my setup, but this isn't the only setup that I use. I always change this, and that's why I talked about all the different settings and the components of how to control the light. Let's say we took a picture of this and the picture was too dark. What would you do? Well, first of all, I would probably try to move closer to the object. Whenever they say, if you take a picture, it doesn't look good, just move closer to the object. That's what they say, right? But if you still move closer, if it's too close and it's still too dark, then what can you do? I don't want to drop the f-stop because then it's going to start to get blurry in the back. I don't want to change the shutter speed because I don't want the object to move. The flash is already at full intensity, so what can you do? The only choice you have is to increase the ISO. You can go up to 560 or 800 and see if that changes the illumination of the picture. And that's one way to do it. Just be creative. You have to, that's why you need to know how to change settings as you go on, because not every picture is going to turn out the same always. So here is a picture of a polarized filter that I've made at home. And you can see that it cuts out the glare. And we'll talk about this a little bit more. And when I said I have 4 flashes, I actually lied. I actually have 6. So this is my third setup that I use. And a lot of this is actually a very popular setup that you see. And you see on Instagram and Facebook, a lot of people take photos with this and upload it because it looks really pretty. And, this is the same setup as U2. So you can take that off and take it with that setting. But the reason why I take it is not just because it's pretty. And here are some examples. This prep that I took with this bouncer. And this is an indirect light. So the flashes are not coming directly at the object, but it's actually going into the bouncer pocket, and it's basically raining light down on the subject. So it's indirectly illuminating the subjects. And when you do that, you get to see a lot of internal effects on a tooth, if the tooth does have a lot of internal effects. So here's an example of direct flash and indirect flash. These are restorations, veneers done on 6 through 11, and they were taken side by side, exactly on the same moment. So you can see on the left is taken with direct flash, which is very harsh, and you can't really see a lot of details and the internal effects. But you can see on the right side, you can actually see a lot more internal tooth structure of the restoration. So using these type of bouncer photos for your lab technician is also very helpful. Again, another example, these are just pictures of my wife. You know, you can see that on the left is pretty harsh. It's not harsh, but you don't see a lot of detail. On the right side, you get to see a lot of these effects, which I see when I see my wife in the sunlight. When the sun shines down on the teeth, you can see a lot of different effects, and this is kind of only shown through this indirect lighting. Okay. Well, that's all I have to say about that, about the camera setup. So let's move on to the shade guides, which is, and we're going to talk about this just relatively briefly. And it doesn't really matter what kind of shade guide you use. I use the Vita Classic Shade Guide, and I also use the 3D Master. There are a lot, really nice shade guides out there, like the linear ones that are, laid out. They're the same shade guides as the 3D Master, but they're laid out in a certain way that's easier to use. And they also have easy shade guides that you can measure the color, and even intraoral scanners, they can pick up shades and tell you what kind of blocks to use and all that. But I want to talk a little bit about dehydration, because when you take out your shade guide and start taking photos of the tooth, dehydration is a big problem. And what happens in my clinic is when the patient comes into the clinic, the first thing my assistants want to do is basically dry the teeth and dry the tissue and put topical on the patient. And that really dries the teeth out. And by the time I walk in, all the teeth are dehydrated. And the value goes up significantly when the tooth dry out. Some studies say that the teeth can dry out in 3 minutes, and it can take hours or days for the tooth to rehydrate back, depending on the type of tooth that the patient has. So I really don't want to risk, having the teeth dehydrated, because a lot of the times when the teeth are dehydrated, you take a photo, you send the crown. When you get it back and when you try it in, you get a very significant difference in the value, and the patients notice that very quickly and say, oh my God, this tooth is way too bright. So where do you, so first thing is I go ahead and take the photo as soon as possible, pick the shade, right shade, and then you need to learn how to position the shade guides in the right position. A lot of people don't take pictures with the shade guide in place. So as long as you have it, it's better than nothing. But the best way to do it is to actually have it so that the shade guide is in line with the tooth itself, and the camera is coming at a perpendicular angle. And you can see here that I also have a gray card here. So I usually have the gray card here and the shade guide here on the top, and then try to take it and to try to create less shadows. But also, I know a lot of people recommend actually flipping the shade guide so the cervical is facing the tooth, and they actually grind like a shoulder here in the cervical area. And basically, they butt up the shade guide against the tooth, which is fine because it makes it more stable, and you can put it on the same perpendicular plane. But years ago, when I was doing my residency, a very talented ceramist, Hiro Tokutumi, he practices in Boston. He came and gave us a lecture about shade taking, and he always asked us to leave a little bit, at least a millimeter of space between the tooth and the shade guide. And one of the reasons was, if you butt the shade guide against the tooth, and if the patient has a very translucent incisal edge, the shade guide is going to impact the characterization of the incisal edge. So he always said, please leave a space, don't touch the tooth with your shade guide. So that's the protocol I've been using. Make sure nothing touches. This is just another picture from the internet I got. So, you know, if you're not sure which, you know, shade guide to choose, this is one way to do it. Just kind of, you know, pull up your shade guide and just, you know, take a picture and just let the ceramist figure it out. But the biggest problem with this picture is that if you look at the shade guide, there's no numbers on it. So we have no idea what this shade guide is. So this is probably one of the most important pictures. I always take a picture of the shade guide that I actually used for this patient. And I put it on the gray card. I take a picture with it. So the ceramic also calibrate the shade guide color as well. Because we don't know if the shade guide that we have change color over time. I haven't read any studies on that. You know, all the harsh chemicals used to sterilize the cavity wipes that we use on these, I don't know how it's going to impact those colors. So the best way to do it is actually take a photo of this and actually send the shade guide to the ceramist or to the lab if you want to be really picky about it, right? So here are some, again, this is the case that I just showed here. The bouncers, regular flash with the shade guide and the card, and the polarized filter with the guides and the gray card. Try to make sure you leave a little bit of space between the two guides so it doesn't incisal edges. And also don't forget of the guide on the gray card as well, okay? So by Mr. just talked about Hiro Tokutumi, very talented ceramist. These were Emax, layered Emax iterations, and this was a very difficult case because we're just restoring unilaterally. You know, if you're restoring 8 and 9, or you know, and it would be much easier, but unilateral was of a challenge. But we'll pull this through. So that's all I have to say about the shade guide. It was a pretty quick segment. And let's move on to the cards. We're gonna talk a little bit about and basically wrap this for today's session. I use 2 different kinds of gray cards in my practice, and one is the Weibel gray card, and the other one is a gray card that was made by Sascha Heinz. He's a ceramist from Germany. And the Weibel card, you can buy it on Amazon, and this gray card from Sascha Heinz, you can buy it from photomed.net. And you see here, these neutral gray colors, so a value of having a 0, that makes the color neutral gray. And this indicates that this has a luminosity of 79. And you can use this to actually calibrate the photos on your Photoshop. And this Weibel card, it doesn't say it, but the A and B value is 0, and also luminosity of this card is 75. So when I'm using this, I changed the luminosity to 75, and this one is 79. And I'll show you what that's. And this card is where something you don't have to do. All you need to do as a clinician is actually just take the photo and send that photo to your to the lab, and the lab will be doing this. So the important part about this is that you can learn how to take photos and, you know, using instruments. Your lab also has to know how to process these photos. One example was I've been taking these photos and I've been sending to a local lab to do my posterior crowns. And after about 3 months, they finally called me up and said, "Hey, Doc, why do you have those weird, you know, gray things in the background?" And they had no idea why I was sending those photos. They weren't calibrating all the photos. So you need to have your lab in this too. And you need to make sure they understand why you're doing this, and they can actually have all those correct softwares to color correct the photos that you're sending. So this is more of a reference card. It's just kind of like being a third point of reference. So you have the gray card, you know this is neutral color. So if you go into Photoshop or Lightroom, you click on this card and everything else in the photo color corrects itself. So this is just a video showing what happens in the lab. You don't have to do this. The lab technician can actually do this for you. and because they'll be using this photo to build their ceramics. So if you go into Lightroom here, choose the photo that you'd like to import. And let's see, let's choose this one. And if you look at the color picker, pick that area and click on it, and see the A and B here on the top just turned very close to 0, and it color corrected the photo. And then you bring over the cursor over here with the exposure box here, and I'm trying to control the luminosity to be as close to 79 as possible. I move the the numbers up and down, trying to see it, if I can get it as close to 79 as possible. I try and change the decimals a little bit. Now I'm able to get the luminosity right. So this photo right now that you see is the true color based on using the gray reference card. This is what you would see in the patient's mouth, okay? The only caveat here is that your lab technician has to calibrate their monitor. So make sure the monitor that the ceramist is using is calibrated so that the monitor itself is showing the true color, because within this photo it could be true, but if the monitor is not calibrated, then obviously the color they're seeing is not going to be correct either. So here's another example. In this case, I actually turned the gray card sideways. So if you look here, there is these small dots here, and this is actually a distance indicator. So if you're using an FX camera, like a full frame camera, you see those little round things when you look inside the viewfinder. Those round circles, if you match it up to here, it's the right distance, because also your shade could change depending on where your flash systems are. And this is for the DX cameras, which is a good indicator for distance. But one of the problems I found out with these cards is it's too big. And if you try to put a card upright in the patient's mouth, unless the patient is very class 2 or they can open really wide, the card just doesn't fit in, and you can't take it at a perpendicular angle. So I just turned it kind of sideways so it kind of fits in there, and then I try to line up the shade guide as best as possible, try to keep it apart, and then you take photos of this and then this and the shade guide, and you send it off to the lab. And ceramist, I work with a very talented ceramist in Florida. His name is Sungbin Im, and I've been working with him since we were in Augusta, Georgia. He was one of the ceramist that was inside the Aesthetic Center, along with another very talented ceramist, Aram Tarosian. And a lot of these cases turn out really well because we communicate and we talk to each other all the time. It's not like I send a case and say, hey, just please make this crown for me. We always talk about which material to use. I took this photo. Do you like it or not? Do you want me to take another photo or at a different angle? So we have a lot of conversations between us, which makes the communication and having photos obviously makes it a lot easier. So these were lithium disilicate restorations. These are actually called amber press. It's a lithium disilicate restoration from Korea, and Ben and I have been using this for all of our lithium disilicate restorations. We've been having pretty good success with it, and Ben likes the way the colors and the translucencies turn out, and the powders that he uses also integrate pretty well with these. So we've been using this for a while. So let's move on to the last segment of the lecture, which is using the polarizing filter. So what is a polarizing filter? So if you take two pieces of linear polarized film and you put it perpendicular to each other, they become cross-polarized and they eliminate the surface reflection. So if you look at here, there's a picture of a lake or the water. You can see the clouds and the sky. You're basically seeing the reflection of the sky. But on the right side, if you use a polarizing filter, you don't see the surface reflection, and you can actually see what's underneath the water, the rocks. So this concept has been around for a long time, and it's been used to actually take pictures in the museums or when you're taking pictures of oil painting, because oil paintings are very reflective. And if you try to take a picture of an oil paint, you'll lose a lot of details because of the reflection. So if you use these type of cross polarization filters, you can get a lot more detail in the photos. So I have these really fancy filters that you can buy. They're called Polar Eyes, and it was invented by a dentist from Greece. And these are very, very nice, sophisticated cross polarization filters. They sell them at Photomed. As you can see, the photo on the top is non-polarized, and then the bottom is polarized. So you can see a lot more detail beyond the surface reflection. I personally use a DIY filter that I made, and this is just the Roscoe polarizing filter. You can buy it from B&H or Amazon, and you can make hundreds of these filters at home. And I actually have a YouTube channel, and I kind of go through this process of how to make this step by step. So if you guys are interested, you guys can check out my YouTube channel, Strictly Dental, and you can actually just kind of make these filters for a relatively low price. All right, so this is basically, calibrate again the polarizing filter here. And if you look, you just have to be careful when you use these shade guides. It creates shadow right here. Make sure you don't click on this area because that's not going to correct the color correctly. So make sure you click on the area that is not casted by the shadow. And again, I'm trying to control the luminosity, so it's about 79. And you can see I'm exposure going up and down. It's pretty close. That's pretty. So this would be what it looks like under cross polarization and without this reflection. And they have a lot of softwares. Two of them are very popular nowadays, the eLab and the Matisse, and they actually give a recipe to match the shade. So as you can see here, Sasha Hines actually recommends not taking the gray card photo with the shade guide. He basically says, he says you can just take a photo with the shade guide and import that into the software and click on this area, and they will give you exactly which powder, the amount to use here, here, here. And this is kind of like I think this is the scoop that picks up powder, and then you mix it together. And if you layer it, just, as the software tells you, they're claiming that it can come to a pretty close match. And this is a similar system, the Matisse. Take photos, cross-polarization photos, and you put it in their software, and they give you basically these recipes that you can follow. I've talked to my ceramist, I've been about it and see if he, if he likes it a lot. But, at the end of the day, I mean, these are really, really nice tools to assist the ceramist, and they can help them. But, really, basically, they need to have a pretty good grasp of the colors. So Ben always says, please take a picture of the shade guide with the gray card, because I want to see what the shade guide looks in comparison to this. Because just following this recipe, it could be okay, but if something goes wrong, it could be disastrous. So just want to have a backup. So that's one of the ways. Just always listen to what your ceramist says and see what they want. This is a case I did about over a year ago, and the patient came in. She had a PFM restoration on 8 and 9. She really wasn't happy with the way it looked. She got them when she was relatively young, and she was having some marginal breakdowns around these teeth. So she really wanted to switch them out. But also she was very concerned about, the finances. And she really asked me multiple times, are you sure you can make this to look good? I mean, you have to promise me this is going to look a lot better. So I said, no problem. This is what I do. This is my specialty. I do this every day. So trust me, I can do this. And so, I took all the photos that I need to do. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Gray card. Okay, polarized filter. Okay, let's do this. And then don't forget this. Then I remove the crown, just remove the caries and just prep very lightly. And I take a photo of the preps too, because the preps, you can see the, big difference in the chroma of these two preps. So I took a, shade photo of those preps too, because we'll be using lithium disilicate again. So, make sure, we don't want the restorations to be affected by the stump shades here. So we did all that. And I sent it to the lab. I made new provisionals that actually uprighted the midlines, and you want to make sure where the incisal edge is, supposed to be. You want to lengthen it, shorten it, whatnot. And after you seat the provisional, you want to make an impression of this and send that to the lab, so they also have a reference to where the incisal edge is supposed to be, right? And this is our first try-in. And when I first put it in, the patient just said, "Oh my God, it's too white." And the reason why she said that was, I think what happened was the stump shades were really dark, and they were different. So we were trying to, mask the stump shades with a very opaque ingot, and then layer the porcelain on top. And having that really opaque, and the opaque dentin shine through was really making the crowns stand out. And the patient thought it was too white. She just kept saying it was white. So I called Ben, and Ben said, and Ben asked me, "So do you think that we can just do an external stain and lower the value? Do you think we might be able to get away, or do you think we need to restart?" And, I wasn't really sure, but I kind of had a feeling that, it was the opacity was coming more from the quartz. I said, well, let's just try and do an external, tone it down a little bit, see if that works. So we send it back, and actually, this is actually a very good shade guide. I didn't take any shade guides in this case, and I thought, this will be my shade guides. Photo of this, and because this crown is going back, so the ceramist can try that in and see the color. So we toned it down a little bit, but still the patient was not happy at all. So after discussion with Ben said, "Oh, why don't you take a shade guide? Can you pick the shade guide that fits the best, of the current situation? Take a picture of that to me." And so went ahead and did. It was basically a start over. So, doing the external stain wasn't enough. So basically we started the case all over. And just in case, I wanted to make sure the stump shades were correct. These are the composite stump shades that were made by Ben, to see the color, and actually match really well. So I said, okay, this is really good. So please just keep on using this, and let's do another set. So finally, on the third try, we got those in. This is completely a new set of crowns. And the way you check it is actually if you take a cross-polarization filter after you seat the crowns. This is really the true test of whether this will fit or not, because it may look okay like this, but when you take a picture like this and you see if it does match, then it doesn't really match. But, this one was pretty good. Patient was pretty happy with the results, and we were able to deliver these restorations. So this is, again, the amber press. I still like to use the hand wax, and press, and I think that has better strength. And just like, Dr. Lane Ochi talked about, a few days ago, I really enjoyed his lecture, just excellent lecture. Doing something, having the internal fit, having a good internal fit on the restoration will, prolong the longevity of the restoration, along with occlusion and other factors. So I still like to use the lost wax technique. I think it's more accurate, but amber also has these really unique milling blocks for CEREX. And one thing that makes this unique is that they have basically one block, and you fire it at a different temperature, and the opacity changes. So if you want a high opaque, ingot, you fire it at a certain temperature. If you want really translucent, you fire it at a different temperature. So you don't have to have ingots for each, you can keep your inventory pretty low. So, and I've heard labs, they mill with this, and they have really good fracture toughness or fracture resistance, so that when you mill them out, the margins, tend to mill out a lot cleaner, especially in thin areas. So this is the crown seated, and this is about a 3-week post-op, and the patient is pretty happy. And then, so this is how we went through this case. So just another case. This is a case that the patient was in a motor vehicle accident. He fell off his bike and basically his couple of teeth flew out of his mouth, and he went to the ER. He broke his chin, so they plated the chin, and this the screws kind of went through the apices of those lower incisors. So the lower incisors had to be taken out, and we placed an implant. And Dr. Epstein placed the implants here, and we restored these number 8 and 9. These were actually, the pulps were not exposed, so we went ahead and just treated these, did some very conservative preparations for, again, lithium disilicate restorations. On the bottom, instead of doing multiple bone grafts and soft tissue grafts, which can be a bit unpredictable, I decided, I talked with the oral surgeon and said, just place the implant at bone level, and I will make the deficient area in pink. So that's what we decided to do. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the pink shades, because pink shades are very difficult to actually match. And there's not a lot of good pink shades that are out there. So what Ben did for me is he sent me basically all the powders that he uses for his pink shades. And he fired them and put them on a shade tab and basically sent it to me. And whenever I do a pink shade, I actually take this out and I take a picture with this with the gray card, because, you know, it's not really a good, and this can be actually adapted to, you know, even the porcelain, the white porcelain. If your ceramist uses a certain system, you know, you can have dentin and enamel, different shades, and he can fire those up for you and send it. That'll probably give you the most accurate custom shade guide is here as well. So on the bottom, we used katana zirconia with pink porcelain, and the uppers are amber press, and we anodized these implant abutments. I try to do pink, but they actually don't have pink, and this is the closest to pink. I mean, it kind of looks like pink if you look at it in a certain way. So this is, but it blends in relatively well, and this is how the case turned out. And we were able to avoid multiple surgeries, and patient's pretty happy with the restoration. So, all right. So we talked about front teeth all this time, but what about back teeth? They said I'm going to talk about posterior teeth, right? So back teeth, you know, I wish all my patients can open like this, you know, say open, but the truth of the matter is most patients open like this, right? And then you try to put this huge gray card into the back of the mouth, and it never gets past the first premolar. So what I do for posteriors is I don't use this gray card. I actually use the Weibull card, and I cut them up into small pieces, segments, so that it'll fit in the back of the mouth. And I put it on the shade guide like this, and then I actually take a photo like this from the sides, okay? Now, for posterior teeth, a lot of the times, sometimes patients can't retract very well, or, you know, they just don't open as much. So it's really hard to get a perpendicular angle to the gray card. So on the top, you see, I try to get to the, you know, as perpendicular as possible. But sometimes I actually, if it's like a second molar or something, I actually turn it, you know, so that I'm looking at it from the front view, because the crowns, you're not going to really look at it from the buccal view, but you're actually looking at it from the front. So you can take photos like this from the frontal view and send that, and that can be used for the molars as well. So in this case, I was actually trying to match the molar crown to the number 28 instead of 29, because I just thought that number 29 probably needs to be replaced in the future, and I didn't want it to match it to number 29, and then those two crowns don't match to 28. So I just took the shade to 28 in comparison, and I try to match it. This is also a katana zirconia, and we seated this crown on number 30 as well. So what about stain? You know, if you look on your lap slips, a lot of them say, you know, stain light, moderate, heavy. So which one do you choose? And again, we're trying to leave that up to the imagination of our technicians and ceramists and say, guess what the stain might be. Just guess, and let's see if it fits, right? So realistically, that's why you have to take a lot of pictures and send it to the ceramist. This is a case I, again, did with Ben. You can tell that, you know, the color match is absolutely, you know, perfect in this case. And also the occlusal surface stain is very, very nice. And that is why I always have a mirror, an occlusal mirror. And the reason why I start out with taking the polarizing pictures is I take the polarizing filter, take that off, and I put on my regular flashes. And after I take it with the gray card, I actually put the occlusal mirror in and take occlusal shots and buccal shots of all the teeth that are natural. Like, for example, if I'm doing a number 14 and let's say number 3 is a natural tooth, then I would take a picture of number 3, the occlusal surface and the cervical part, and then send that to the ceramist. If let's say all the molars are restored, then you can take a picture of the premolar. So you want to give as much information to your lab as much as possible so that they can mimic the amount of stain that they'll have. So in this case here, we're restoring number 14, and I took a picture of the occlusal shot. You can kind of see the occlusal stain on 15, and you can see that Bin did a very nice job of replicating the stain on the occlusal portion, and you can see that it matches really well. So all those subtle things, these small informations, if we can give all that to our ceramists, they will do their best job and they'll give you an exquisite, excellent restoration. And again, this one, we were trying to mimic the cervical aspect of the restoration. And you can see this patient had a lot of recession, and she had a lot of class 5 composites. And you can see 4 and 5 blends in really well with the patient's dentition. And these are all possible because buccal shots and occlusal shots were all taken. So, all right. So this is how I actually write my case prescription. I actually don't try to write the shade, because if you write the shade, a lot of the times the labs, they actually just go by what you wrote and they don't actually open up the photos that you send them sometimes. So what I try to do is I just say the photos are in the shade and the USB, so just look at them, please. And they will actually look at those photos and give you their thoughts and whether the shade matches or you should pick a different shade guide or whatnot. All right, so today I will have a PDF for the camera setup and today's lecture, the presentation. If you guys want to send me an email, I can actually just send them to you directly. If you guys want to look at the polarizing filter that I made, if you go onto YouTube and subscribe to my channel, Strictly Dental, I have other also small tips that you can do in your own practice, about lab work and wax ups and pouring up casts. And also my Instagram account, I have some cases that I upload here and there, so you guys will be able to kind of enjoy that as well. So anyway, I would like to kind of wrap up today's webinar with Catherine. So I know we started talking about Catherine, and she asked me that question, have you done this before? Well, there's really no way for me to explain to her how, I've done this before and I think I can pull it off. There's really no way to tell her that. So what I decided to do was, hey, let me just take some molds of your teeth, of your top and bottom teeth, and I'm going to work on it. I'm not going to charge you, but let me do something for you. And if you can come back one more time and I can show you what I'm going to do to you, would you be open to doing that? And she said, yes. So what I did was I said, okay, we're going to take out one lower incisor, and then we're going to do an ortho setup to align them, restore the lower 3 incisors, and I waxed up the top teeth because the patient she basically put her foot down and said, I'm not having braces on the top teeth. I'm only going to have them on the lower. So I said, okay, we're just going to restore them restoratively from canine to canine, and then do ortho on the bottom. And in this case, what I did was I actually did a mock-up. So I took the wax up, I made a silicone impression of the wax up, and I transferred it to the patient's mouth, and I filled it with bis GMA and loaded it into the patient's mouth, and I removed it. And I took a picture of this, and I literally put this picture side by side on my laptop, and I showed the patient and said, Catherine, this is what you may look like if you let me work on your teeth. And when she saw this picture, she basically, everything I said didn't matter afterwards, because she just kept saying, I want this smile. I want this smile. I don't care what it takes. I want this smile. And imagine, I mean, look, I didn't do anything to the bottom, but, this picture was so powerful to her that this really changed everything. And we decided to move forwards and, finish the treatment. So I extracted the lower teeth here, and I referred the patient to Dr. Bayless, the orthodontist in town. And what I was trying to work with her was, I was trying to redistribute the space and also intrude the lower anteriors so the gingival levels were equal. And I also wanted her to actually retrocline the teeth, because a lot of the times when you intrude teeth, the tooth become procline. So the teeth actually moves out as they intrude. But if you do that, I have to prep more, because the tooth are coming forward. And if you want to create space for the restoration, you have to prep and go into dentin. So I said, please intrude. And after you intrude, retrocline as much as possible. So my margins, so I can preserve as much enamel as possible. And this is what she did. And we were able to gain some restorative space by moving them, retroclining them and intruding them. And this took about 1.5 years. And after that, I did another set of wax up, provisionalized her, and made impressions of this, and then send this along with the final impression to Ben. And I try to stay as conservative as possible, trying to stain enamel as much as I could. If we actually did ortho on the maxilla, we could have done a even more conservative restoration. Again, these are all amber lithium disilicate restorations, and only 7 through 10 are layered. Nowadays, I prefer to do monolithic restorations, just to prevent fracture of the restorations. And I know, monolithic is not as pretty as, bi-layered, but, the functionality, and redoing restorations, cutting them off and all those stuff is biologically a very risky, procedure for the patient as well. So I like to stay monolithic if possible. And basically I only ask Ben to layer the teeth 7, 8, 9, and 10, and everything else is monolithic. So these are the restorations in place. And this is her before and after, and she's a very, very happy patient, extremely satisfied with her final outcome. And she still comes to see me all the way from Cedro. It's, it's an 1.5 hour drive, but she comes every year to get her cleaning and just get her teeth checked up with me. So basically what I'm trying to say is that, photography is a very powerful tool that we can use to really communicate with our patients and really tell them what is possible. And also, photography is a great teacher. I'm sure everybody has had great mentors in their lives. And also camera photos can be a great mentor. You get to see your work, and you really, you just want to be better by looking at your work. And, that's how I practice every day. So I urge everybody to pick up their camera, and it doesn't matter if you have the gray card or the polarizing filter or not. If you can just start by picking up the camera and start taking photos, I think that's going to make a big difference in your daily practice. All right.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Kim. Just a fantastic presentation. I think you saw that by maybe some of the chats that were going on during your presentation, or you're probably just too focused. But anyways, we've got about 30 questions here, and we'll try and blast through them here in 10, 15 minutes. So starting off, this is obviously a question from a starving student. How do you manage those huge amount of file data compounded by large raw file sizes and the expense of cards?
Yeah, so I try to, it is a good, a realistic question, because the raw files can eat up a lot of space, and the nicer camera you have, the higher megapixels obviously is gonna fill it up faster. What I do is I try to go through my camera once a week and download all my photos on the weekend, and I go through them and I just erase the cards. So every week on Monday I have a clean card, and I take the photos that I need, and I have to pick the ones that I'm going to use, and the ones that I don't use, I have to just throw them out. It's just no point of having, thousands and thousands of pictures that you're never going to look at. So that's how I just keep it. And make sure you keep multiple backups. I've had backup, hard drives break, and you lose a lot of information that you'll never be able to get back. So I have about 4 backups that are copied all over the place, and I keep 2 in my practice and 2 at home. So.
Okay. With the twin flash setup, he says it's locked on the lens. Do you use the extending arms? So I think they're referring to like the PhotoMed R2 point. Are you using those at all?
Yes, I actually have the PhotoMed brackets, and I also have the bracket made by Sasha Hines, the guy that invented the gray cards. Those are all excellent, brackets. I don't use them every day because, for one thing, like Sasha Hines's brackets, those are actually configured so that you can only put the flash in a 45-degree angle, which he says it's the best way to illuminate an object the flashes from 45 degrees. But those are good for anterior teeth. If you're taking shades in the posterior teeth, one of the flash won't reach the tooth at all. So it'll be very dark. So the setup that I use can be used for anterior and posterior because the flashes are really close up front to the lens. And so it illuminates from the front part. So even if you do posteriors or anteriors, you get consistent illumination. I used to use those brackets for a long time. But those are good for direct flashlights, like if you're doing posterior restorations, or if you're doing mirror shots, because mirror shots tend to diffuse the picture and make it softer. So those are good. But yeah, I mean, you're more than, just play with it. If you have them, just use it and, make up your own system. Yeah.
Okay. Are you doing a custom white balance?
So the custom white balance, basically, the custom white balance, yes. So I set the color to 5200 Kelvin. So that's customizing the color temperature. But like I said, if you use a gray card, it doesn't really make a difference. Whatever photo you take, you go into Photoshop and you click on the gray photo, it automatically calibrates the rest of the color for you. So the color temperature, or that's more for if you're just using a JPEG photo. Yeah. So I just use the gray card. Yeah.
Okay. Are you using manual focus or autofocus?
Yes, that is a very good question. And I know there's a lot of people that use manual focus because the 105 millimeter lens that we use, it's a very jittery lens. It just kind of goes in and out all the time, and it's really hard to focus. But I like to use autofocus because the manual focus, you really have to, you set your distance and then you're moving in and out, and you have to find that moment when it's in complete focus and you have to snap the photo. But I like to just use autofocus because I think the camera does a better job at focusing. The trick that I use when I use autofocus is, because the lens does come in and out a lot, I usually pick a sharp angle somewhere in the photo. And if you focus on that, the camera focuses a lot quicker.
Okay. Can the speaker talk about overhead lighting in the operatory? Is it super important or not?
The overhead light, yes and no. If you are doing like posterior restorations and you're trying to take photos, it helps better if you have an overhead light shining on it so you can see, so the camera can actually focus faster. But even in the anteriors, I don't use it usually, and it doesn't really matter because the flashes that you're using are so close and they're so powerful that it'll wash out any effect of the overhead light anyway. So I don't think it really makes a difference, but if you want to use it, that's totally fine too. Yeah.
Okay, we've got a number of questions just on the modifications you did with your flashes for the R1C1. So with the polarizer, with the angled attachments, etc. So could you just briefly talk about those?
Sure. So let's see. Go back to.
And I think the one slide where you've got the 45-degree guys on there is what they were referring. Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah. So this setup actually comes with the R1C1, the speedlight system. So this is basically, comes out of the kit like this. You can just kind of assemble it together. This one, so let's say you have a sheet of paper, the polarizing filter. And I use like a marker and I put a dot here and I put a dot here. So if you cut everything just, parallel to each other and put them to the side, it won't cross polarize. You need to have one paper that is going this way. You have to almost imagine that the papers have a line going through like this. So you have to cut one this way. The other one that you cut has to be cut in a way so that it's turned this way. And when you have those polarizing filters at a perpendicular angle, this is when the light gets crossed out. If you have those, if you take these polarizing, the flashes, if you move one of these to the other side so it's off 90 degrees, it won't have the same effect anymore. So you just have to see it once, if you, like I said, I have it on my YouTube channel. If you just see it once and you see how it's cut and you put it in, and you can even play with it too. I used to use like the cross-polarizing filter that you can use on the lens itself. And you can actually turn them and you have these paper on the flashes, but those were kind of inconvenient and it took a long time to find the right angle. So this is just a lot faster and quick and easy way to do it. The Polarize is also a very good system, but again, you have to take them on and off. So I just didn't want to save, I wanted to save time in the APERTURE. That's why I use this setup. Yeah.
Do you have any experience with the Shofu camera, which takes pretty decent pictures?
Yes, so Shofu, yeah, they have a point and shoot camera. Those are very nice cameras, and it's easy to use. So it's better than nothing for sure. The only thing, I'm not sure if the Shofu cameras allow you to take the photos in RAW form. So that's the only disadvantage of that. Like I said, I think RAW is king, and RAW is the most important shooting mode that you should be in. So that would be the only reason. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Along the lines of cameras, why are Nikon so much better than Canon? Nah, we'll leap past that question. All right, both Dr. Kim and I are big Nikon fans. So here's a question about black contrasters. Do they help with shade selection? Do you personally use them, or do you post-edit to create a black background?
I like to use black backgrounds, but that's more for like artistic shots or after post treatments. I don't usually use them for shade taking. I just use the black, the gray cards. And even if you want to black out the the black parts in softwares, from Keynote, it's actually easier if you do have a black background and do it than rather than just having nothing there. So I do use a black background for usually post-treatment cases. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, this person's asking, do you use a clear lens protector attachment? If you do, how do you get the flash to click into that attachment? So having a little problem with the equipment there.
The clear, let's see, what is it?
So, the lens protector. So I think what they're getting at is once you screw that lens protector on, then your flash bracket won't mount the same way. So I think they actually
like an
adapter. You know what?
Yeah. So you just need to get a different adapter that can go on top of the lens, like a clear lens protector. I used to use them, but Dr. Hess, actually hosted with Dr. Ramos a course by Claude Sieber. He's one of the best photographers in the world, and he he's a ceramist, and he recommended to take off all filters and coverings from the lenses. It does create a little bit of aberration, so I've been taking them off since, so I don't use any covers on the lenses. Yeah.
I'm pleased you mentioned Claude Sieber, because we actually had a question that what do you think of the ceramist Claude Sieber's dental and personal photography?
He's great. He's the greatest. Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Very-
phenomenal, isn't he?
yeah, phenomenal. Yeah, phenomenal work. Yeah.
Okay, do you think that placing the white balance card behind the incisors like that would cause a reflector effect and mess with the translucency of the incisal edge?
Yes. So yeah, I probably have some photos where the gray card is touching the tooth. So yeah, that's probably not a good thing to do. But I make mistakes too. So
And I would guess when you're taking that incisal edge photograph, you're in cases you're not putting it behind there. You're actually taking a separate shot for that.
yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Dr. Kim, thank you for the presentation. With the polarized image, is it possible to do this with Photoshop or only with a different flash?
I'm not sure if you can. That I probably can't really answer. I'm sure there's a way to get rid of these reflections, but I would assume that's it would take quite a bit of work in Photoshop to do that. And just having this cross-polarizing filter just makes it so much easier and faster. And it literally takes 10 more seconds to take this photo. So I would just do it this way. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. You've already answered, how do you make the background black? That's with the contraster or in Keynote. What tips do you have for capturing the last tooth in the arch with occlusal shots?
Yeah, that's very difficult. Actually, one way is when you place an occlusal mirror in the patient's mouth, rather than just putting the mirror edge like on the distal of, let's say, number 2 and pivoting the mirror because the patient has to open a lot, I actually drop the mirror down and have the mirror almost touch the mandibular molars, and then have the patient open and take the picture. So you get more distance, and you'll actually get a better photo of the second molar. So.
Monitor calibration with the lab. They want you to talk more about it, and then we will roll this other question in. What if you're shooting in Adobe RGB and your monitor doesn't have that full gamut? Is there any advantage?
Probably. I mean, it's you can switch to shooting in sRGB, but because you have more information, I don't think it hurts to have more information. You can always convert it to an sRGB, but you can't convert an sRGB to Adobe RGB. So it's just kind of like if your computer can't pick up raw files, then why don't we just take it in JPEG? But the other way around it is perhaps you can still take it in RAW and convert it to JPEG. So I think I would still go ahead and do the Adobe RGB. In terms of the monitor calibration, actually, I kind of took this slide out. This is the display monitor calibration, and you can use ColorMonkey. I used to use this, and I bought the other one. They're basically the same thing, and you put it on the monitor, and this is just a video of how the calibration works. So you just put it on the monitor like this, and just goes through different, color rendering, and it calibrates the monitor to the true color, basically.
Terrific. Okay, what stump guide do you use in your office?
Stump guide, I know they have different stump guides for like Emacs, and they have different shade guides. I just use the same, the Vita shade guides that I use for the stump shades. Like I said, you don't have to have the absolute same color. The color shade guide is a reference. You're showing the ceramist, this is what the color or the chroma is like, or the hue is like. And so I just use the same shade guide for that as well.
Beautiful. What are your feelings on the color calibration or using intraoral scanners such as the
Mhm.
Trios?
I think right now, I mean, I don't know if the camera, I don't know, I haven't seen any kind of research on the, you know, how accurate those shades would be. So like I said, I'm sure we're going to get there pretty soon, and we'll be able to, you know, export those files in a raw form and, you know, use those images. But as of now, I think the digital camera it's just a lot more convenient. Yeah. And it has more information. Yeah.
Do you have any luck in delegating photography to your assistants?
Yeah. So I know a lot of people, you know, they don't want to do it and they try to teach their assistant, which is a good thing. I mean, a lot of assistants, I've seen them take great photos. Um, I personally just do it myself, especially shade photos. Other stuff, you know, it's fine, but I just kind of like to do it, and I just do it really fast. So, and I know if I do it, I know it's been done correctly, and I don't have to worry about, well, this wasn't done right, and we got to do it again, bring the patient back in, and whatnot. So, yeah, I just like to do it myself.
Okay. Let's see. The question was that a 3-unit bridge on a single implant on that trauma case?
Oh no, that's 2 implants. So there's 2 implants here, and that's a 4-unit bridge. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. What photos would you take matching a single canine crown, and what angle would you take that from? Do you send pictures of the contralateral,
Mhm.
etc.?
Sure. So that's a great question. When you look at the canine, because it is the tooth that turns the corner, I would actually take it from 2 different angles. So straight on with, with the centrals in the middle, and I would actually turn and have the canines in shooting perpendicular to the canine itself. So you want to have 2 angles because, the canine does have 2 sides to it. So, the mesial part does have to match the anterior section, and the distal portion of it does have to match with the premolar section. So I would actually take it from 2 different angles. And yes, if you want to take, I'm not sure, I have a picture of a single canine here. So if you look at it here, this case was a single canine. So it does help a lot if if you just take a picture of this canine and the lateral, it doesn't really help the ceramist. You want to take the picture of this side too, of this canine, and then show that to the ceramist. And the other thing is when I do anterior cases, this is not particularly related to photography, but when I do anterior cases, I always take a full arch impression because I want I want to give as much information as possible to the ceramist. And if you have contralateral sides, they can actually look at the anatomy on the opposite side and copy that on the other side. So anterior cases, I almost always do a full arch impression. I don't do a triple tray impression for anterior cases. So.
Okay, here's an interesting question. What do you do differently, lighting wise, for photos if patient is working in nightclubs under the lot of fluorescent lights? How do you make your restorations match under those conditions?
Yeah, I guess you probably need to, yeah, that's a very important question. I mean, if, you don't want to make them look edentulous, right? So obviously you would have to relay that information to your ceramist and make sure that he uses a lot of porcelain powders with fluorescence in it. And you can get those, what is it, those lights that you can buy, to check if you have the black light, to see if you have composites on the teeth. Can use those when you're doing your try-ins to see if that makes any difference, or UV lights. Yeah.
Okay. Do you give the raw files to your lab or do you export as JPEG?
Raw files. So I give them as raw files. I used to color correct it myself and then send the JPEG files to the labs. And then I switched to just sending the raw files to the lab, and the labs can play with it, because if you send a JPEG, they can't they can't do any edits to the photo. But if you send the raw file, they can play around with it and, look at a different, change the value and see if there's any internal effects and whatnot. So actually giving them more freedom is better. So give them the raw file, don't give them the JPEG. Yeah.
Okay, we have a PROS resident asking, what do you do, what software do you use or system to make backup copies?
Backup copies, I just do it manually.
Okay.
I just drag it, yeah. Mhm.
Okay, any tips to keep from scratching mirrors during sterilization?
I use like a microfiber pockets I have. So I put them in those pockets. So after I use them, the assistant washes it with soap and soap, and they kind of clean off the mirrors. They dry it, they put it in the pockets, and then we sterilize it. If you wrap it up in like a paper towel, it does scratch the mirrors over time. So.
Okay, we're down to about our last 3 questions here. So if I'm taking a buccal shot and there's a dark buccal corridor and my image turns out really dark, what should I do to brighten it?
Mm-hmm. So there are a couple of ways to do it. Most of the time, if you're taking a buccal shot and the photo is dark, it's because the flash is not, one of the flash is not reaching the area that you're photographing. So, and that's one of the great things about the flash systems that I use is you can actually change the position of the flash, and you can actually put 2 together. And if you point it towards the mirror that you're taking, it illuminates that area a lot better. So I would change the position of the flash. Yeah.
Okay. Would it have been possible to do the mandibular ortho without the extraction and still have gotten a good result?
If we wanted to have a good result without taking the tooth out, yes, we could have done like an IPR, strip the teeth in between and slenderize them and then put them in place. But then after you slenderize them and you align them, you need to prep through them to put the restorations on there. So you're reducing the tooth quite extensively in order to restore those. So if you really didn't want to take out the teeth, I would probably go the route of not restoring the lower teeth, just stripping them and just aligning them and just have uneven gingival levels. That would be one other compromise that you can have. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And our final question, what are some good CE courses that you recommend to learn more about cosmetic procedures, veneers, anterior crowns, etc.?
Oh, well, tons of courses out there. Really, I mean, we got a lot of courses coming up in the WAGD. I mean, Dr. Hez, you got a preparation course coming up, and I will also be speaking at the WAGD next year, I believe, and it's going to be on mostly ceramic restorations, and that'll be also, I'll be talking a lot about anterior cosmetic restorative procedures. The Spear Education has great programs. The Coyce Center also has great programs, really all over the place. Yeah. So.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kim. It's been a nice hour and a half. We really look forward to your full day course with the WAGD Master Track program coming up. Our 2020-2021 lineup is out. We have some fantastic speakers. So please go to the WAGD website. That's washingtonagd.org and take a look at that master track, because we do have a few slots still open, and we put together a great lineup. And if you get signed up, then you can let us know what you want Dr. Kim to focus in on. All right, with that, I'd like to thank you all. And just a reminder, CE credits will be out in the next few days. You'll get an email, and then it will be reported to the AGD on your transcript probably within a month's time. We do have a webinar tomorrow. Dr. Peter Unger, he's an anthropologist from the University of Arkansas, will be speaking. He does a lecture called Evolution's Bite. absolutely fascinating, fantastic. And it's interesting that lecture has been picked up by the Smithsonian. So it's going to be really well received, and I think you'll enjoy that webinar if you have a chance to join us. So with that, we want to say stay home and stay safe and healthy, and we will see you in the coming weeks. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank.
All right, are we out?
Was it okay?
Yeah, it was good.
Gentlemen, I'll be ending your meeting now, so hold on just 1 second.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, Val. And it's just you and I.
No.
Yeah, good job. Yeah,
Thank you for the invitation.
yeah. I had kind of forgotten that you're one of our Master Track speakers, so that'll be great. So hopefully
Mhm.
this was a way to get a few more people to sign up for that as well. So.
Yep. Yeah.
All righty.
Very
Well,
nice.
probably time to go have a beer or something.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, bud. You take care. We'll talk soon, eh?
All right. Well, take care. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.